Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talking God and Politics with Mark, Mike, and the new member of the squad, Denise, my wife. And how you doing, Mark?
Hey, doing well. Good to see you, Denise.
Good to see you.
Actually, this is the first time we've met, so
I think so.
so
So
good to
we
meet you.
missed you last week.
Yeah, man, it's been crazy with work and just the weekends with the kids. So, you know, trying to fit all everything in and then do this show. It's sometimes it gets a little crazy.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Well, it's there's been some stuff going on, but of course we're continuing our review of The Great Awakening by Alex Jones. Now, Mark didn't get a chance to go over chapter 5. He had some thoughts on Stalin and
Yeah, I
Hitler.
did. I thought it was cool. You know, he opens chapter 5. He says, "There's something you should understand about evil individuals and governments. They make terrible allies. It is perhaps their greatest vulnerability." And he goes into talking about how Germany and the Soviet Union agreed to to create a non-aggression pact. And the funny thing was, is Hitler and Stalin, he goes on, had been at each other for years. And when you look at like the history of World War II, really what you're fed is that Germany attacked, the Soviet Union, but the reality was they were planning on attacking them. He just did it first, um, and it paints this picture of the and I'm not saying that the Nazis were great or anything, but you get this history fed to you that's just not true. And I thought it was interesting. He went into how Mikhail Gorbachev and his campaign had this open, the perestroika that was going on at the time, whereby the records could more closely be examined and different views between what really happened. And it's reminiscent of when Bill Clinton did the when he passed the Freedom of Information Act, which I was not a big fan of Bill Clinton, but I thought that was a great thing because it opens up the ability for the American people to see the records. Now, sometimes it takes time to see those, but when it finally comes out, you can read it, and that's what they did with World War II. They released all the records, and one of the things that came out was the attack on Pearl Harbor. Everything that we've learned in school and watch documentaries on is that it was a sneak attack by Japan. And the reality is, when you read the archives, it was not a sneak attack. It was a way for the U.S. government and FDR to get us into the war, because people at the time did not want to get into a fight with, join these wars that had been going on in Europe for hundreds of years. So there had to be a way to set this up, and it was a perfect way to do it. And there's a book out called Day of Deceit, and I think I've talked about this on previous shows, The Truth About FDR and Pearl Harbor by Robert Steinert. And he goes into detail because he's poured over these thousands and thousands of records that have been released to show that it really was a setup. It was not a secret attack, that FDR wanted to get in the war, and he knew if he provoked Japan strong enough that they would attack, and he just laid out this small little island for them. And in fact, the book talks about the admiral of the fleet at the time was they wanted to he had been asked to position the ships in such a way, and he said, no, if we get attacked, this is where we will be the most vulnerable. And he was demoted and sent to Alaska for the remainder of his time, and they put in another one that would do what FDR wanted. So it was interesting to see Alex go into that, because you see the same thing on the side of with Germany and the whole attack on the Soviet Union. So it just, revisionist history, I've always said that I like revisionist history because in a lot of cases it brings out the truth, but you listen to the court historians and the government side of it, and you don't get it. All battles, history is written by the victors, not the victims, and that's especially
Mark,
true in the war.
Let's stop there for a second and discuss. There's two different kinds of false flags, right? One kind of false flag is where you attack your opponent or another country and claim someone else did it, or you have intel that you're going to be attacked and you allow it to happen, that gives you now a precursor or a story to now have your war, right? So October 7th, I believe, was that second kind. And Pearl Harbor was probably the same. We probably had the intel, right?
Yeah.
Is that what that book is talking about? That we did have.
That lays it out, and
we laid it out beautifully for him.
And one of the other interesting things is that it was filmed in color, but at the time, no one was filming in color. Nothing, movies, none of that was filmed in color. But if you watch it, it was all done in color. So just some interesting things to think about. And, you look at the other wars, Vietnam was another one. Just like you said, it's a false flag that sets us up so that we can get into another war. And that's what Vietnam was about. But back then they still understood the Constitution, and they didn't just let the president declare war. They had to go through Congress. Where nowadays a president just can call up troops and go anywhere he wants.
There's another book that's really good. It's called, it's written by Diana West. It's called American Betrayal, written by Diana West. And she goes all the way back to World War I, even a little bit before World War I, with the sinking of Lusitania, which was also a false flag to bring us into World War I. And she covers and explains explicitly with declassified documents how FDR was completely infiltrated with communist ideology, especially those around him and his chief of staff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a book. I'm not a huge fan of Patrick Buchanan, but this right here kind of talks a lot about that. How Churchill and Hitler and FDR were kind of together on a lot of things, and that he supported socialism. And at the time after the war, you saw the government really gravitate towards what was going on in the Soviet Union with communism and all of that. Anyway, so that's what I thought that was one of the things in chapter 5 that was interesting to me.
And the whole concept that the World Economic Forum, their philosophy is to get all these tyrants and put them in one bag and mix them up and see what happens. I mean, it's the worst plan in the world. Obviously, they're going to end up eating their own. I mean, these guys are wired to dominate the other, and they're just waiting for an opportunity to stab someone in the back so that they can climb on over them. So it's so his philosophy is right on. I mean, if you just go by what the Bible teaches on the depravity of man and this 1% that he talks about that are just psychotics, and they're drawn into politics because of the love of money and the love more of power, really, than anything.
Yeah, and speaking of eating their own, you see this going on in the Democrat Party as well, with the mayor of New York and the things that went on in Chicago. But it's interesting to see that if you don't play by their rules, then they're going to figure out a way to destroy you. And I think that's what's happening with the mayor up in New York right now. But chapter 6, I liked as well, because, I knew we had a lot of bases around the world. I didn't know exactly how many. After World War II, the proliferation of what Truman called the military-industrial complex really, it just exploded. And he calls out that there's 750 bases in 80 countries. And I like too that he starts out. He says, "Look, here's all my citations. Here's where I got that from."
Yeah. I got the receipts.
Yeah, he's like, "Go ahead and try to refute me." And for a long time, I did like the Cato Institute. I don't know what happened to him from a libertarian standpoint, but they had a lot of good information, and he includes it in this chapter. But it is since 1980, U.S. bases in the Greater Middle East have been used at least 25 times to launch wars or other combat operations in at least 15 countries in that region alone. Since 2001, the U.S. military has been involved in combat in at least 25 countries worldwide. Now, this was back in 2022, and it just shows you that, the lie that we have these bases to keep peace around the world is exactly that. It's a lie, because there have been more wars facilitated because of the fact that we have all these bases by the United States than ever in history. Ron Paul said it. He said the 20th century has had more wars than probably in the history of the world. Of course, he said driven by the fact that the Federal Reserve was created, which is true, because once you can print money, you can do whatever you want. But these bases don't help. And it's not, a lot of Americans think that, well, we're there. Those bases are there to keep the peace. But if that was the case, where's the peace? So anyway, good. I liked chapter 5 and chapter 6 kind of went hand in hand. I really liked.
I liked. There was a stat in chapter 6 that just hit me. I think it was 40% of the military equipment sold around the world come from our military industrial complex. Like we are the ones creating the war machines and selling to bad actors and profiting off of it. And it's so sad because we're these neocons always present themselves as we're spreading democracy around the world. And that's why we've got to get involved here, because if we don't get involved here, they're going to bring it to us. And do you want that? I mean, it's just such a load of, what?
Yes, it really is. And, we've been sold this idea that our military has kept us free, that our military has kept us at peace. But the reality is it hasn't. We've never been invaded. I mean, you can call 9/11 an invasion. That's fine. Maybe on some level it was, but we've never been invaded. So what are they doing? Well, if you take
9/11 was another one of those kind of false flags that we just talked about, where you have the intelligence and you let it happen. And there may be even some evidence that we were active in letting it happen. Because right before that, one of our politicians was asked where all the trillions of dollars went. What's that guy's name?
Donald
Rumsfeld.
Yeah. And it was like the next day or something this happens.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that was a false flag as well. I absolutely believe that. And the more I've looked into 9/11, the more a lot of things don't add up. Now, who was it? I'm not going to get into that. I've got my theories. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah. What you mean, our best friend?
Yeah.
The 5 dancing Israelis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that it really is an industry. And that's really what chapter 6 is about. He's showing you that it's war is an industry, and that, because America is the economic power of the world, the best thing we can do to power it is war. I mean, look at Ukraine. Who are bidding on building Ukraine when it's all over? the big, large investment firms in the United States, BlackRock being the number one. I mean, go in, destroy a place, and then American finance comes in and finances it.
That's what
I mean,
Ukraine's all about.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Zelensky was like, yeah, we're going to have BlackRock here. We're going to have, all these investments.
It was interesting to see,
Dick Cheney.
Trump is rising in the polls big time. So it was interesting to see that Zelensky came out two days ago, and he's wanting to broker a peace accord with Russia. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Did you see it? Is it true? I don't know, but it is interesting to see that. And he did meet with Trump a few weeks ago. So it's going to be interesting.
And then he just met with the Prime Minister of Britain. So he's still playing both sides. And Ukraine, it's just a black hole of corruption. The whole thing is a black hole of corruption. And for those who want to go, oh, you're a Putin apologist. Putin has been very reserved and measured in his response.
Absolutely.
And I think that really needs to go back and looked at. I also think that those who know should really go back and listen to his interview with Tucker Carlson, because he was giving you the history of why he feels he had the right to do what he did. I don't know Russian history. Tucker didn't know Russian history. It completely took Tucker off guard. But he was giving you his reasons. And there are those in the know, in power throughout the world, who understood exactly what he was saying.
And Putin has been fighting. He knows he's been fighting these Jews. These, when they come over to America, they're called neocons. But he knows that he's been fighting these communist Jews for a very, very long time. Yeah. And they settled there in Ukraine. And I don't know if you've noticed, but some Jews, quote unquote, are moving into Ukraine right now. So I guess the Khazarian Jews are going back to their homeland finally, the real homeland.
Well, and
stay there, and we could bomb the crap out of them someday.
Denise, it's not that Ukraine is corrupt now. Ukraine, since it broke from the Soviet Union, has been corrupt. It's one of the most corrupt places ever. It's like, why would we shouldn't even care about that place. It was so corrupt.
Well, that's why Trump got impeached, because he just started to question it. I mean, and they shut that thing down because that's their breadbasket, man. That's their source of money laundering, and they could not have that.
I think it's hard. I think it has been hard, and more people are waking up to the fact that the United States has committed regime change throughout the world. But in 2014, Victoria Nuland went over there and committed regime change, and that's how Zelensky got in power. That is their money laundering breadbasket right now.
A comedian he was a comedian on Dancing with the Stars or something.
Cross-dressing comedian at that.
Yeah, playing the piano with his penis. Yeah, he's a real he's a real winner.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I do want to call out, just because all of this is really proliferated by the Federal Reserve. If you look at, it's not just about the destruction of the dollar, but when the Federal Reserve is created, you just see the proliferation of war and corruption that now I believe we are hitting the peak of. Not just the destruction of the dollar, but we are hitting the peak of corruption in our government at the federal level. So Mises Institute, I've talked about on this channel quite a bit when I talk about where money came from and just economics 101. The Mises is an institute at Auburn that teaches Austrian School of Economics, which is 180-degree opposed to what Keynesians believe. And they actually have come out, and I haven't seen it all, but I did want to let people know that it's there on their site and it's on YouTube, at least for a little while. we'll see if YouTube catches on and they pull it. But it's called Playing with Fire: Money, Banking, and the Federal Reserve. And man, just from the, the 15, 20 minutes that I watched, it's very good on if you want to understand what the Federal Reserve has done. And it's only 40 minutes long, and it will give you insight on how it's destroyed our dollar and really why we are experiencing what we're experiencing today, from grocery prices and fuel prices and just all the costs of living just go skyrocketing. So I wanted to put that out, and I'll put a link in the video notes on Rumble. So I wanted to put that out there, but that's about all I wanted to cover. What do you guys have?
Okay. Well, there's a little snippet here from Charlie Kirk that we thought was really, really good. And I'm still debating whether I want to play something by Stu Peters on Hitler. And I may do it just because I'm a rebel, and that's just kind of how I roll. But let's do this Charlie Kirk clip here real quick. Right. Can everybody see that? This is my screen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Watch again.
About Springfield, Ohio, really quick, which, of course, with the Haitian cat eaters that are coming in. Springfield, Ohio is a perfect example of how the ruling class has treated the heartland of the country. Step one, we close the factories and we send them overseas so that people don't have work. Step two, we flood those communities with opioids so that they're permanently addicted and we kill a lot of them. Step three, we send their kids, their sons and daughters, to go fight no-win wars, and they come back with permanent health issues. Step four, we flood their town with foreigners after we've completely abused and broken them, and we sent their jobs overseas. Step five, the residents who are still there and have survived all this abuse notice that the foreigners are doing really weird stuff and illegal stuff, like driving in head-on traffic, killing kids, eating cats, and taking geese out of the pond. And then we call the people that are still there in Springfield racist after their factories have closed and their sons died in Iraq, and they're addicted to opioids, and their local schools being overrun by Haitians, but they're racist for noticing that their home is turning into Port-au-Prince. You wonder why Donald Trump's poll numbers don't go down. You wonder why so many people wear that red MAGA hat in Springfield, Ohio, because he is the only lifeline that these people have. He is the only hope that they have, the only person that does not insult them or talk down to them and wants to lead a rebellion and, yes, a revenge campaign against the people that have done this to them and destroyed their home. Amen.
I thought that was really good.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been watching it. I think he's wrapped his tour up, but man, it was good. I've seen every city he's been in. When he went live with his channel, I was one of the first to sign up. I said, "Here's my money, take it." But it's been great to watch those and the people that he's brought on. I mean, even Roseanne Barr, who I could not stand. And after that, she's still a little annoying, but man, she had some good insights, and she's realized she's kind of gone through it and gave a good picture about what's going on with Hollywood and all of that. So yeah, the Tucker shows have been great.
Yes. Okay, so here's one by Stu Peters that I already knew some of this. I did not know all of this. Let me preface this by saying I'm not a Holocaust denier. All I'm saying is that there was a context, a historical context, as to why the people in Germany had this hostility towards Jews. All right. A lot of it had to do with them taking over the banking and stealing their farmland, incredible interest rates and things like that. But there's some stuff here that I didn't know that I wanted to share with everyone else. And I want to get your opinion. Okay. This is Mark and I and Denise. We throw out opinions. We throw out other views, other viewpoints, and we want to educate each other. All right. We're all just students. So I want you to listen to this. And I was fascinated with this whole book burning, how it started with them burning the pornography that was brought about through some of these Jews. So watch this.
Anyone who wants to ask questions, anyone who wants to dig deeper, anyone who wants to learn about the real causes of World War II, the real conditions that led to Adolf Hitler taking power in Germany, is slammed as a revisionist. Oh, you're noticing something? You have questions? Oh, well, you're a Nazi sympathizer. Or any number of insults that have been fine-tuned over the years, fine-tuned to serve as dog whistles with maximum impact, to send all of the useful idiots running toward the truth seeker to shut him down as quickly as they can, to make sure that he doesn't influence anyone else with all of his question asking, with any of his noticing. And this gatekeeping of history isn't limited to the classroom or the education system as a whole. No, it is society-wide. People of all ages are intimidated out of doing their own research. When it comes to vaccines, when it comes to anything, especially when it comes to the hellish conditions faced by the people of Weimar Germany, perhaps the most disgusting country in world history, where many of the social experiments that we now and our kids are being subjected to made their debut. The Weimar period in Germany, which lasted from the end of World War I in 1918 to the day that Hitler took power in 1933, was a time of complete and total degeneracy. Humiliated by their defeat in World War I, the German people were just plunged into poverty. Their money was worthless. The social fabric of their entire country had been completely torn apart. Marxists were deliberately creating the conditions necessary for a perfect and total societal collapse to usher in their Bolshevik agenda. Sexual perversion was rampant. There were child prostitutes on the streets of Berlin. There were mother-daughter prostitution teams who desperately engaged in unspeakable acts in exchange for their next meal. And Weimar, of course, was the birthplace of the transgenderism and gay rights movements that have once again reared their ugly heads to plague Western Christian society, especially America. All of this was happening with the full blessing of the Weimar government, which was largely controlled by Jews. The Jews controlled the German court system. Jews controlled the German banking system. The Jewish people had unprecedented overrepresentation in Germany's government, and they ruled the numerous and hyper-violent communist factions that were trying to take over the country, both by force and at the ballot box. The Jews also ruled the biggest cultural forces of the time, which were often merged with academia, with the medical field, maximum infiltration for maximum effect. Sound familiar? They would set their crosshairs on something. They would decide on something that they wanted to completely destroy, some sense of normalcy that they wanted to chip away at, and they'd legitimize it through phony academic and medical studies, just like they continue to do right now today. And one of the most disgusting, most revolting figures of the entire Weimar Republic was a man called Magnus Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld was a Jewish physician and self-proclaimed sexologist who pioneered transgenderism at his Berlin-based Institute for Sexual Research. Hirschfeld himself was a homosexual. He was the father of transgenderism. He's still hailed as a hero today by many a pervert. He was the first person to perform a male-to-female tranny operation way back in 1931. He castrated a gay guy who later died after a botched attempt to transplant a woman's uterus into his male body and allow him to carry a child. These same disgusting science fiction perversions that are being peddled to us today with the backing of the US government and a bunch of perverted so-called doctors were being peddled to the Germans in the 1930s by their government and a bunch of perverted fake doctors like Magnus Hirschfeld and the others who hung around his facility. Now, I'm going to ask you to just imagine. Just imagine for a moment how sick one has to be actually be the guy to come up with all of this and then to actually do it to people, to carry it out. It's not a pleasant image to think about. But imagine this disgusting surgery. I mean, it's brutal today in 2024. It leads to permanent disfigurement. It leads to infection. It leads to death. Just think of how hideous it was 90 years ago. Just think of how exactly perverted, how anti-human, how satanic this Hirschfeld Jew must have been to do something like this. And Weimar Germany was full of people like him. They authored books on their alternative lifestyles that they hoped would one day become the norm. They produced heinous forms of pornography that were then plastered all over public spaces, sold cheaply and abundantly to distract and degrade the German people. This was the climate, the atmosphere of complete and total perversion that really led to the National Socialists and Adolf Hitler being swept into power. Because they promised a return to order. They promised a return to basic reality in a time of human decency. And so, of course, millions of Germans supported them. They were looking to do anything that they could do to take back control of their country, to protect themselves and the generations to come. These people were pushed to their breaking point, and they broke. And one of the first remedies that Hitler and the National Socialists had to offer, one of the quickest ways that they knew to rid the public square of the perverted filth that was corrupting and destroying their country, was to smash up the Institute of Sexual Research and other places like it, to storm perverted libraries, perverted bookstores, and burn all of their transgender manuals, all of their porn, all of their disgusting literature on leading homosexual lifestyles, on having sex with children and animals, and anything else that you could imagine, and probably some things that you can't even imagine. They did exactly what reasonable people would do if given the opportunity. When it comes down to the old Nazi book burnings, as they call them, it was justified. It was great. It was awesome. Period. Point blank. They went straight to the pornographers. They went straight at the perverts. They went straight to the purveyors of transgenderism and homosexuality, and they took their works and they set fire to them so they could not be used to destroy anyone else, to destroy any more children. And they didn't just stop at book burnings. No, they rounded up the freaks like Magnus Hirschfeld. They stripped them of their citizenship. They sent them packing. Hirschfeld himself fled to France, another country that was going through rapid and disgusting social changes at the time, and he finally died in 1935. He isn't missed. But his legacy of perversion is still being felt to this day. Others, mostly Jews, picked up the mantle of Magnus Hirschfeld, and they've carried it into the United States, into the Western world. They're doing everything they can to make it mainstream. They're doing everything that they can to make us surrender to this degeneracy, to turn our countries into modern-day Weimar republics. The same attacks that the Germans were facing in the 1920s and the 1930s, we are right now facing today. As we speak, our kids are walking into what can only be described as a spiritual battlefield every single day when they get on that bus and they go to school. They're surrounded by sex-obsessed freak shows and perverts who would like nothing more than to expose them to the works of Magnus Hirschfeld and other disgusting freaks like him. Only now, it's even worse. Because these same types of materials, transgender training manuals, pornography, books about children having gay relationships with grown men, now number in the thousands. They're everywhere. It's even worse than 1933, because now they're online. They're on your smartphone, they're on your tablets, they're in your kids' classrooms, they're in physical form, they're openly available in school libraries, classroom bookshelves, with the total backing of not just the teachers and the libraries directly peddling them to kids, but of the entire Department of Education. Even the so-called President of the United States, who, let's not forget, partied with bare-chested trannies on the White House lawn. We are facing Weimar conditions in this country. We're reaching a point where these conditions must be met with Weimar solutions.
I thought that was some interesting history.
Yeah, I mean,
I knew
definitely.
about a lot of the Jews and taking over, the banks and the Germans cutting themselves off from from the Rothschilds, and how that part of the history is never told. But now that other part about the sexual perversion and the transgender,
Never,
I never heard that. So I thought that was
I
rather
haven't either. The one thing I will say is, what the world did to Germany after World War One was tragic, and we the Europeans countries as well as the United States really put a lot of financial burden on that country to the point it broke them. The inflation went through the roof. They basically made it that they could never get out of debt, and it was really that the world said, you know what, you're going to pay for what you did for World War One. And from an economic standpoint, it to the point that they couldn't do anything. But most of the people, and even if you look at the history of Hitler and why he came out of that, was because they didn't understand, you know, the economic impact of how inflation works. The fact that the German government was printing so much money just so that they could figure out a way to get out of this financial burden they were in. So the people looked at, well, who owns the banks? If you look at our society today, they're doing the same thing. They're looking at corporations. Oh, they're greedy corporations. They're raising their prices. Oh, they're greedy oil companies raising their prices. No, it's economics. They have to. They're not doing it because they want to, though there are some corporations that absolutely will try to benefit off of a tragedy. But overall, that's not the case. And I think this is exactly what was going on when Hitler came to power. And guess who owned all the, who ran the banks, who ran the financial institutions, who had the money? And so the German people look at them and go, oh, it was the Jews. They did all this. But without a doubt, if you look at it, the European nations and the United States put way too many burdens on the German people after World War One, and this and the perversion and everything just gave power to a dictator that, and a megalomaniac that was going to solve the problem.
And we're no defenders of Hitler and some of the stuff he did.
Absolutely.
But we are trying to show you another side.
Yeah.
Mark kind of started this off with some stuff that you haven't heard in history, in your history books about Pearl Harbor. Well, these are some things that you haven't heard about why Hitler and the Nazis did what they did.
Right.
So we just want to be balanced.
Absolutely. And you look at, this is what I was concerned about. And I think the first couple episodes that we did, I talked about it, is that, if we reach this point where our financial institutions collapse and we fall into this, what's to say that another human person like Hitler could rise to power in the United States and do the same thing? Because, once people are pushed to the brink, they, out of desperation, they vote for people that stand up and tell them, look, I'm going to give you everything and I'm going to take this back. Now, we've had a long history of freedom, and we understand to some extent, most people. I think that's why we're seeing Trump, killing it. All those polls on the mass media are wrong. All you got to do is look at Polymark, where they bet on it.
Yeah.
He's killing it. He's got the popular vote. He just got Pennsylvania. He's probably without a question, he's going to get Wisconsin. He's already gotten that. He might even get Michigan. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I talked to you about it in one of the shows, and I've always talked to my wife about it. I've always said they keep it so close in the polls, so when they steal it, the Americans go, oh yeah, but it was real close. So they don't have a concept that it was stolen. But if they gave the accurate polls and showed just how far Trump is ahead, and then they stole it, then they know we'd probably come after him with pitchforks.
Well, that's been the beauty with X, man, is it's there. There's a couple of folks on X that are posting these Polymark, analytics every other day, showing that people that are betting on this see that Trump's going to win, and they've been more accurate than any other statistic that we've had since it came about. In fact, the federal government made it illegal for Polymark to do business in the United States, so Americans couldn't bet on the elections. You can get a VPN and do it, but I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying you can get around it. But that goes to show you that when somebody puts their money down, those are the polls you need to watch, because people are betting money on this. They're doing research. They understand. So, anyway.
I was going to go back to your point, about Germany. Most people that watch this probably already know, but the Rothschilds and the banking system that was set up before World War I, back to the Napoleonic War, has funded both sides of every single major conflict in this world since the Napoleonic War. And so it doesn't matter, honestly, whether you're the losing country or the winning country, you're indebted now to the banking system, to the world banking system. You're indebted. Germany lost, so they got hammered. The only reason why the United States has had the financial success that we have had is because the dollar is used as a world currency. That's the only reason. And we are quickly losing that, especially with the BRICS nations.
Yeah, well, it's because we've weaponized the dollar, which we should have never done. George Bush started doing that, and maybe even Bill Clinton, I don't know, but definitely George W. Bush started doing that, weaponizing the dollar. Well, what's that going to do? Look, you don't agree with them, that's fine. You want to put sanctions on them from a trading standpoint, absolutely, do tariffs, whatever. But when you start withholding the money because you control, well, you're just going to destroy your currency, and you're going to destroy the faith in it, and countries are going to get tired of it. And that's exactly why the BRIC has come about.
Yeah, and we also can't forget that Hillary Clinton went over, as Secretary of State, and she totally committed coup against Saddam Hussein. I'm not saying he's a great person by any means, but because he did not want to go along with a world banking system and he wanted to create his own currency, the same thing with Gaddafi, they went in and they killed him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's sad that the United States is the host for the New World Order parasite. And they use our military, the war machine, right? Kind of getting back to Alex's chapter there in chapter 6. They use our military power to implement what they want. If there's some countries that are not in line with the world banking system, then they use us to smack them down. And
so
in the name of democracy.
Yeah, oddly enough.
So watch closely what's going to happen in the next probably less than 10 years with El Salvador. So the president there, started mining Bitcoin, I guess about 6 years ago. And it's totally revolutionized his economy and brought him out of the financial burden that he's been under for years with the IMF. And last week, the IMF came out and basically you could tell they were not happy because this country is getting out from under their control with a digital currency, and they don't know what to do about it. And, Argentina is going to be another one that you're going to watch with Javier Milei. But you watch El Salvador, and let's see what the IMF does, because they are saying no to their loans. They're saying, no, we don't need your loans anymore. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of South America responds. But I'll tell you, Argentina and El Salvador are two to watch for the next, I would say.
And I would be curious when Trump gets in, because he's already said that he's going to protect Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He's already said that. So I would be very curious to see what happens if Trump manages to get in, how Bitcoin starts changing our economic situation.
Right. Absolutely. Yes, it will be. I think he's sincere. When Trump first ran, he tried his best. I think he was new at politics, so he got,
for sure.
He didn't really know what he was doing, but man, he's run the gauntlet. I think he knows what he's doing. He's going to be our next president, and it's going to be great to see some of the things he's going to do. And I think most of what he's run on, he's gonna accomplish it, because he's never really lied to us. And I've always said, and Mike, you know it, I said, I didn't, in the first time he ran, I didn't vote for him, but the second time I did, because he was so honest. I'm a libertarian more than anything, and I just looked at politics as like, it's a study in
The depravity.
yeah. So I got off the couch, and this time I'm very excited. So we'll see. I'm definitely voting.
Yeah, and RFK. I mean,
Yeah.
he is the guy to deal with the corruption with big pharma, big ag. I mean, he is the man, and that he's in his sweet spot. I wouldn't want him as president. I want him right where Trump is putting him, because it is perfect for him.
I agree with that too. And getting Elon, is he going to put him in this position to cut the federal government? I hope so. Maybe this is one of the things he can't get done, because it's going to be difficult to overcome these huge obstacles, and basically the deep state standing in the way. But I hope he tries it.
Amen.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have not only Trump in the White House, but we're going to have control over the House and the Senate. I mean,
yeah,
we're going to have that, or we're going to hit so many obstacles.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, because there's so much blackmail. There's so much money that they print all the money so they can throw as much money at these politicians. And when you have that many senators and you have that many congressmen at these parties, they're so easily controlled.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me. And the ones that do manage to get in are all these Zionists. So the Rothschilds love that. It's like, well, if we're going to give them some resemblance of representation from Christianity, they're going to be our kind of Christians, the kind that we've been funding ever since 1830 with Schofield and Darby, that tell us that we're in sin if we don't support Israel's genocide and theft of land and all that nonsense. So
yeah, we just watched a short clip of a rabbi saying that the reason why we were experiencing so many hurricanes is because that we were not consistent in our support of God's chosen people.
But the kicker in that video was that he wasn't saying it. He was saying there was this Christian pastor that he was watching, and he encouraged everybody, all the Christians, to go listen to the Christian pastor that was saying that the reason why we're getting these hurricanes is because we're not supporting Israel. And it's just like, and yet they're all behind weather modification. We talked about that we're a host to the New World Order parasite when it comes to the war machine, but we're also the host when it comes to geoengineering. I mean, if there's a country that's not playing ball in economics and then in the one world currency, not only can we squash them with our military might in the name of democracy, but we can create a hurricane and totally wipe them out, or cause no rain to happen and just watch them die. I mean,
there's been a lot of
and that's not God doing that.
Right.
That's us playing God trying to.
There's been a lot of good. I've been kind of since the last time we talked about that, I've kind of put my focus on, how are they doing it? And X has got a lot of good videos showing how they attach them to the planes, what the aluminum, whatever is, they drop in there and all of that. It's really good.
It's funny, Mark, on Facebook, I'd get so mad, and my wife would be like, what? Are they censoring you again on Facebook? Yeah. I mean, I'd put up all these stats, all these studies on Facebook about COVID, about the vaccine, and they would, you'd get that blurry screen, right? And you'd be like, yeah, people are going to hear this. And then the fact checkers just wipe it out. And they're doing it again with geoengineering. It's the same pattern. It's so disgusting.
It is.
It is.
It's funny because, when you look at it, after we came out of COVID and everybody, kind of started going, okay, what happened? And they start questioning the vaccine and all of that. It comes out that that Alex Jones was what 95% correct. They went and looked at everything that he had called out from 2 years before COVID and then up until maybe a year ago. And he was 95% correct on every single thing he said.
And yet we have someone in the discussion group, Richard. Totally, bless your heart, Richard, but you are a little bit ignorant here, and you drank the Kool-Aid because this is the only thing he has to say about the show so far. Alex Jones that lied about Sandy Hook, saying that the families were crisis actors. Really? That's all you've got to say about all this stuff that we've been talking about. And it's like he's drank the Kool-Aid because that's what the mainstream media wants you to think about when you think about Alex Jones. Not the 95% or the 97% of the stuff that he says is true and right, and he has the receipts and he has the documentation. No, you want to take the mainstream media's Kool-Aid on the 5% of the Sandy Hook and identify a man based on that. Richard, can we look at your life and see some glaring mistakes, some major sin in your life? And every time Richard's name comes up, that's what we're going to talk about. Don't listen to anything Richard says. We want to talk about this. No, you wouldn't stand for it. Don't treat other people like that because you wouldn't want to be treated that way. So,
and
if
I mean, none of us are perfect, but I mean, for what he gets paid to do, he does it very well. And majority of what he says has come true, has come to light. That's why InfoWars has blown up and people are listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
He being one of them.
I know. I remember the first book we went through, The Great Reset, and seeing that paradigm shift in you.
Yeah. I mean, really.
Well, I thought really the best way is most people learn when they teach, or at least I do. I learn the most when I have to teach something. Mm-hmm. And so when you're teaching something, you're forced to have the receipts. You have to look at the footnotes because you don't want to look like an idiot when you present something. So I'm like, okay, Mark's kind of on the fence about Alex. Well, let's go through this book. Let's see if his footnotes are right and if there's any errors. And Mark's just like, man, this stuff's right.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, man. I'm telling you.
All right. Any concluding thoughts? We'll start with you, Mark.
No, I am very excited about this election. We're coming into it. We've got 3 weeks left. I think it's going to be good. I think it's God ordained. It's finally going to happen. And I just hope that, that when it happens, people can get back to what is good, what is right. And let's move this country forward in the right way. And, just there's going to be a lot of things to overcome from a monetary standpoint. But, man, with X and, I even hear that Zuckerberg is trying to come around to libertarianism. He's hired a whole crew of people to change his image. I don't know how true it is, but you see this movement towards freedom more than we've seen probably in the last 25 years. So I'm hopeful.
That's because of all the wickedness that they've accelerated trying to get to their 2030 agenda and the Great Reset and the Build Back Better, the bringing in of global fascism. And people are just like, this is not what we want. And so it's starting to wake up so many people. But Denise and I talk about all the time, this election is so serious. I mean, they've tried to kill him twice.
Yep.
Okay. So they're very serious. And we've had Democrats saying that they want a civil war and that they are not going to accept if he wins. So I don't know how many people they have behind them. I mean, I know that they have the people with the power and the money behind them, but I don't think they don't have the populace for sure.
That's right.
So, and Trump always talks about the difference between the TV generals versus the real generals. So it'll be interesting to see if this deteriorates, just where our military is and how
Yeah.
they will respond.
And I think that we're getting a little glimpse of the American people, especially after the response or lack thereof to Helene here in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. So many communities have gotten militias together and
Yep.
have, come up against federal agents or what, and they're like, no, we have this, get out of our community. We will take care of our own,
The
which
sheriff.
I think, honestly, the church, God's people, needed a wake-up call in terms of this is the church's responsibility.
Yeah.
This is not
Not the
for the
states.
government to come in and fix everything for us. We as the church, as God's people, are responsible for taking care of those who are in need and displaced and our own.
But it is frustrating when all your tax money goes to this,
Right.
and your tax money went to pay for a helicopter that should be getting you off the roof because the church doesn't have enough money to get the helicopter.
Right.
I mean, so but I love what she's saying because the church has totally failed. We failed in the 50s and the 60s, and we let the welfare state come in
That's
and just take over.
Exactly.
Yeah, when LBJ came in, that's what happened, and the churches have let it happen, and we're coming back around. And that's what I mean by freedom. When I say that, that's what I'm talking about is people are losing faith in their government as they always should have.
Right. Exactly.
But now they're seeing it that, you know what, it can't protect me. It really hates me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Black community is absolutely waking up to that and going,
Yeah.
hey, nothing has been done for us. And as a matter of fact, when LBJ came into office after Kennedy was assassinated and instituted all the social welfare, the absolute destruction of the entire Black community took place. And they're finally coming around and saying they have not offered us anything.
Oh, it destroyed a culture that was out of the slavery, was a strong, hardworking culture that just wanted their ability to work and own and do exactly what the whites were doing.
And if
And
you
then
read
you had this welfare thing come in, and it just robbed them of that culture. I mean, you look at the American Indians, same thing.
Yes,
when you
same
gave them
thing.
all that land.
Yeah.
Same
And if you
thing
read
happened.
any of Thomas Sowell's books, he can go back and he has all the receipts on the destruction of the Black community due to the welfare system. He is excellent. He is fantastic. Thomas Sowell is just great.
He is awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talking God Politics, Talking God and Politics with Mark, Mike, and the third musketeer here, my wife.
I'm going to change the logo.
We'll have to change the logo. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next. You want to do it next Sunday again, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it.
As of right now, I think so. I'll let you know.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
See you.